that way. Okay, so that's started now. So really, this is the idea here. We're coming to the end of the CLE for most people, but not for everybody, as it happens. So we'll talk a little bit about what the apprentices are doing now, just to give you a sense about how freaked out they are and how much is on their plate. A little bit about how you will be involved, and then the remaining part of the time, which I won't record, will be for Q&A. So when does it take place? Well, usually from January to June, but people start at different times. Do you know what I mean? So there are some people, one or two, who are finishing quite late in June, and even the occasional person who is completing in July. So I am going to say a couple of things about the midway review, because that's a really good baseline to complete the final review. But never mind, different trajectories for different people, isn't it? So the groups of apprentices are the first year on the postgraduate diploma in social work. First time we've run that course this year. Seems to be going pretty good, really, to be honest. And the second year for the BA students. As I said, most are coming into an end, but not all of them. That's just the way it is. Um, Next slide, please. Dermot, come on. Okay, so just a reminder, it's the PCF end of first placement. There's a little link there, but you can usually get that just by Googling it, put in BASWA PCF and it'll come up. And it's sometimes useful just to get a sense of what we expect of learners at this stage. So they're not qualified social workers. They're either in their first or second year of practice. We are expecting a little bit more critical depth than in the first year, reflection, autonomous practice to an extent, but significant use of supervision, guidance, and support. There are Social Work England apprenticeship standards. Now, you don't really need to know about them because it's the apprentice's job to align their work to those standards. And I think you probably have quite enough to do. But one thing we do like to see this year is the strength and depth of the evidence. And that should really be pretty self-evident from the index of evidence. I was talking to an apprentice yesterday. She has 26 pages of it. Now, quantity and quality are very different things, but I know that this person has kept that index going and is continually doing it in a reflective manner, saying, what did I do, or what did I learn, or what training, or what activity or assessment I was involved in, and then what am I learning from it? So as a general rule of thumb, for the whole of the CLE, that's not a bad way to go. So the CLEs, they are determined by the employer. That'll become a little bit more relevant again next year when they go into their final placement. It's always the case with social work placements. You can't have everything that you want. And the employers are constrained by various different things, where there are gaps in staffing and so on and so forth, the usual things that you are fully aware of and I don't need to go through. But at this stage of affairs, we might be starting to talk about that. It has to be contrasting. You know this, but really for some of them, some people, for example, have gone from children's to adults or vice versa, or maybe from a locality team to a mental health team, or from in children's services, it's constellated in many different ways, but perhaps from a front door team to a longer term team. So, there's quite significant transitions in these. It's a minimum of 70 days. So that's what Social Work England tell us. So obviously we have to go by that, but it can be extended, and there is no problem about extending the length of the placement if required. And there may be many different reasons for that. A person had to take leave, for example, or had a period of illness, whatever it might be, or there is insufficient evidence gathered. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. The recommended workload is about 20 to 25%. That doesn't always happen. Apprentices have a little disadvantage in that they are seen as a safe pair of hands, and sometimes that works against them. And people kind of think, oh, that person is fine, you can give them another case, etc. Okay, not a great look. Might be a little bit too late in the day to do anything about it now, but just a comment. a reflection time they generally take, and by this stage, they should have done a direct observation with you as an on site supervisor or mentor facilitating that. And in the main, people have. It isn't always easy to arrange direct observation. So, if it hasn't happened yet, it is not the entire end of the world, but I would advise that try to do that as soon as you possibly can. The Viva is an element of their portfolio they have to do. They have to do a 15-minute presentation on essentially on a case study and describe their learning. And usually these are quite reflective. They've all submitted, which is very encouraging. There's about 90 odd of them. So that's a pretty good rate, to be honest, for everybody to actually submit. And we're in the middle of marking them at the moment, and they're quite a pleasure, apart from the number of them, to actually watch and see, because you can really get a sense of the apprentices' learning, which is just like really nice, basically. Their final portfolio submissions the 29th of June. So we have to be kind of working back from that date to think, what should we be doing now? What should we be getting together, etc., to make sure that they can submit on that date? So really, one of the main things will be the final review. For some people, they're still at the midway review. That's not the end of the world. The midway review is a great kind of point to take stock, sometimes to address any issues or barriers or obstacles to learning, and think about, have we met all the learning opportunities that were originally set out in the agreement at the start of the placement? And are there additional things that might be of value that we will try to do before the end? There's a no surprises rule in social work education. The worst possible scenario, really, is that we get to the end of the placement and then we hear very discouraging noises from the team, and kind of saying, I don't know if this person should pass the placement, etc., etc. That should never happen. If there are issues, they should be raised in a timely manner, and apprentices should have an opportunity to address them. So for the timing, as I said, they're submitting on the 29th of June. So you might work back from that date. Really, it'd be great if the apprentice really had most of what they need, including your input, at the end of May, start of June, really, to give them a bit of time to, it's coursework, essentially. So with coursework, you can maximize your grades by paying attention to every little detail. So giving them a little bit of time to do that would be great. They do have a study week just before they submit, so they have a week to actually do all of those things. But there are quite a few bits and pieces that need to be done, so it needs time to complete properly. So the template, you've perhaps seen this slide before, but in any event, it's the same document and it continues on throughout the placement. So just a little note, as I said, it's often a very important learning experience. They're going into kind of totally new situations and practice contexts. And there is something about practicing and learning as a social worker in something totally different that enables people to kind of go, well, what are the core social work skills, values, knowledge that we need to practice? Because all social work degrees, well, most of them, frontline is the exception, I suppose, are generic. That once you qualify as a social worker, you're qualified to work in any context. Now, I know it's a little bit more complex than that, okay, but there is something about the generic kind of basic level social work skills, knowledge, and values that is kind of, I don't know, reinforced on the CLE in a kind of an interesting and different way. Placements tend to kind of be a little bit slow at the start, which is fine, and then they speed up. I think for the postgraduate dips in particular, they're on a pretty fast trajectory, really. They're on a bit of a gallop. The BA students have had a chance to learn about how to do placement learning agreements and things like that last year. So they're not entirely unfamiliar with the processes and the way of doing things. PG dips pick it up pretty quick, but it is quite a challenge. It has to be said. They're rising to the challenge, I would say, but there is a bit of a difference in how it feels. We always suggest a strengths-based approach. Start with what people can do rather than a deficit model, which starts seeing them as a problem and what they cannot do, and then work in areas for development, which of course there always are. The way we do feedback is very important, and it also should be kind of strengths-based, developmental, wagging fingers, as we know in social work in general, doesn't make anybody happy, and it generally doesn't help people to grow and develop. I'm afraid there are lots of things to sign. There are lots of various documents like the index of evidence and the day tracker and the reviews and APTEM and all of these kind of things. But they do need to be signed off, which is why if you give it a few weeks to kind of do all these things, it'll be less lastminute.com and less stressful. You could do the final tripartite on APTEM. I'm not going to talk about that today. Really, you have until July to do that, so that can actually wait. For some of you as on-site supervisors, you may not be involved in that at all. But if the apprentice wants to do that sooner rather than later and the SRA agrees, that's okay too. Not a priority, I would say, right now, but it will have to be done early July. So just a kind of sense of what they're actually involved in themselves at the minute. What does it look like from where the apprentices are sitting? So they have a 2,500 word essay on interprofessional practice due on the 1st of June. That's my module. Lots of lively class discussions, and they seem to be generally making good progress with that. But just so you know, obviously the final review of the CLE. I mean, even if it's a little while away, they are thinking about that at the minute. And of course, they're going to be collating their portfolios. I'll show in the next slide what they need to put in that portfolio. From most of my conversations, they seem to be on track with all of these things, but just so you have a sense of what they're doing. They do a critical reflection on the CLE. That's an overall reflection on their learning. We do encourage them to include case examples, but it's a more strategic sort of overview of those 70 days. As I said, lots of things to sign, and it's okay to do the final tripartite, but it can wait. But the apprentices have to be doing learning logs, which you may have heard of. Generally, at this stage, they're getting into good habits, basically, about keeping things ticking over. And that's part of what we're trying to do really in the CLE, get them used to these processes, set them up well for next year. So you don't obviously need to know this in great detail, but these are the elements of the portfolio that they have to do. And there's only some of them that really you're going to be involved in. Obviously the reviews, etc., and the signed attendance record. The direct observation, and usually that comes with PLE feedback. People with lived experience is the kind of phrase that we use these days. It doesn't always. In any event, the apprentice has to get at least one other feedback. And if it's not possible to gather feedback from that direct observation, that can happen for a number of different reasons. Then they need to get it somewhere else. Ideally, the on-site supervisor or mentor is better placed to do that. It's an ethical consideration. A person might not be as honest about their feedback, giving it directly to the apprentice and asking a third party to do that is more likely to kind of generate honest and useful feedback. They have an index of evidence, which you'll be asked to sign off, and they have one feedback from a professional. Now, that's not going to be you, it's not going to be the on-site supervisor, mentor, or line manager. Typically, it's somebody else in the team who has seen their work or perhaps has done some work with them. And sometimes it's another professional. It might be an OT or a psychiatric nurse or somebody. It doesn't matter so much as long as it's not you. Generally, that's fairly straightforward and easy to get because people tend to be generous with their time. And there is a kind of an assessment overall, really, by the time we get to that final comment from the SRA, they have been talking about the portfolio with the apprentice for a while, so there should be very little contentious in that final bit of the process. So that's it really. You can see myself and Marva are looking after the apprentices at level 5 at the moment. Email preference for Marva and for me. I think you have our contact details in other places as well. But do feel free to contact us. So I am now going to stop that recording and okay.